Bob Beamon. Coach, we have with us a man who set the world alight in 1968 at the Olympics in Mexico. Coach, what do you remember about Bob?
Oh my gracious, man! Not only people must be. I would remiss if I didn't say Bob was also one of the great basketball players out of New York. He was there with Julius and Charlie Scott and all the other great guys. And people don't realize that Bob was drafted by the Phoenix Suns. So he was one of the great leapers. Everybody used to talk about how I could jump. Bob was just in that caliber above that. He was a New York legend as far as basketball was concerned as well. But in retrospect, that in 1968, I had a chance to go to the Olympic trials as well, and one, of course, the guys that the Apple was JoJo White, Charlie Scott, Spencer Haywood, all the other guys, Mike Barrett. I didn't make it, but Bob was one of the guys that everybody was zeroed in on, and of course, as you know, the '68 Olympics was probably the greatest, controversial but greatest Olympics, all because you had Muhammad Ali and then of course Cassius Clay, and you had the Great Mexico, I would say, show for the Olympics itself, because that was the real pinnacle of the African American experience in the Olympics during that time. But my relationship with him goes so far back, and he's been always one to be available not only for the city of New York but for kids all over the world. He is the face of the Olympics and still is very much involved with the United States Olympic Committee as far as being the ambassadorial things. But the guy is something very, very special, and is not a athlete out of New York or any athlete that played basketball or even or running track would not know the impact of the great Bob Beamon. A lot of people owe their careers to Bob, and of course, when you look in the Olympic uh, uh, museum in Colorado Springs, right behind Jesse Owens is Bob Beamon. Now come on, how in the world he pulled that one off? It remains to be seen, but he's a fantastic, not just individual humanitarian, but a dear friend, and everybody loves him. And a great, great facilitator and clinician as well. So, Earl, I think you couldn't have a better ambassador for not only the Olympics, the only Olympic record that's still holding these 50 plus years is Bob Beamon. We joke him all the time. He's still up there. We're waiting for him to come back down. Maybe he'll
No
come
time
back down
soon. No
sometime.
time soon. Bob, obviously, you go to Mexico with high hopes, getting through the games themselves and becoming a record holder. How did that all play out for you?
Well, first of all, let me thank Coach for a wonderful introduction there. I pay him a lot of money to introductions, So, but thank you so much, Coach, for the introduction. Let me first start out by saying that my first love is basketball, and the funny thing about basketball was that really I never spent enough time on the court like most New York ball players, and particularly during the summer. You're playing basketball from 7 o'clock in the morning until late at night, particularly when you have the lights on in the park. So I only spent one summer playing in the Ray Felix, and but I had some great ball players that I played with. That some were All Americans, that were all city also. So I was I didn't make all city first team, but I made honorable mention, uh, and I was very pleased with that. But I also had some opportunities to right out of high school. While I was in high school to play with the Harlem Magicians. However, my track coach said, we won't have any of that. So we want you to continue to play your high school basketball, but we want you to be on the track team. And so I was a double letterman at Jamaica High School, and I did fairly well. I wanted to make All American in basketball, but I made All American in track and field in high school. So it switched up on me. So I had a great gentleman that played handball and punch ball with me in elementary school, who made All American. That was Corky Bell, and of course Corky and Kareem and them, they made All American, and so they kind of left me behind, so that I would make All American in track and field. But just to say that again, that basketball was my number one interest at the time. And as we go along in this interview, I certainly will tell you what happened down at the end of the road. But as you said, I guess what was the road that I was thinking about making the Olympic team? Well, things are looked easier than I thought they were. I used to see guys running down the runway and jumping in the sand. I said, I can do that. And so I tried it my first time, and I jumped 19 feet, but that wasn't enough to win. But I jumped in the sand, and I think I took second, and I won a medal because I had tried every kind of event in track and field. I tried shot put, I tried discus, I tried running the mile, the 2 mile, and every time I would try an event, I would come in last place. So long jump became a very interesting event for me because I got a medal for it. And if it wasn't for the young gentleman that lived in the neighborhood that got sick, and I took his place in the long jump, I probably would have never really became a long jumper. But I was hurting because everybody was coming home with medals except for me. And so when I got my first medal, I put it on the back of my hat. And I had one of those bebop hats to the side. I had it to the side, and I used to put it on the back, and everybody would just say, "Can I touch it?" "Yes, you can touch it." Yeah. So I love the idea of winning medals and competing and doing well.
When you look back at that time during the games, how significant was it for you to represent the USA at the 68 games and looking ahead to how the games are developed now?
Well, if we look back at 68, that whole 1968 year was a very, very troubled year. Yeah. Not only with the athletes, black athletes, that we threatened to boycott the games in Mexico City, but we had a couple of assassinations. We had Bobby Kennedy, who was assassinated. Martin Luther King was assassinated. It was a very turbulent year. In addition to what was happening in there, was that we had a lot of movements going on. One was Vietnam War. The other was the Women's Live movement, where women really started to come out and say, let's get this thing right. Let's get this thing correct. And so we had that going on. We had so many movements that was going on that it would drive you crazy just to kind of see so many things going on. And it kind of looks like today, where
Mm.
uh, lots of things are being protested. Uh, we we are protesting back then the police, the way that they handle uh, uh, African Americans in the black communities. We had the Black Panthers. Uh, we had so many movements in the black community. We also had riots in the communities all around the country, Detroit, Los Angeles, you name it. And so it was, as I said, it was a very trying time. And so I'm going to take you to the to the Olympic trials, uh, where there were a couple of people uh, that started talking about boycotting the games. And in that year, I was at the University of Texas at El Paso with Nate Archibald. And so, every time I see Nate would say, "Come on, man, you're gonna play with me with Don Haskins and play some basketball at UTEP." However, track and field was the name of the game for me. So uh, I'm looking at Tiny flying past me. I'm kind of saying, well, I might try it a little bit later on, but let me concentrate on this. Let me concentrate on track and field, and maybe the possibilities that I might do something in the games that might bring me a gold medal. And so I really started focusing on that. But attending UTEP, what happened there was that we were getting ready. The track team was getting ready to participate with Brigham Young University, and so uh, what happened there was that the team decided not to go and participate at Brigham Young because the Mormons had a practice that that were not uh, 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 we were not happy with how they handled us and how they talked about us and calling us the big N name. And it was a very racial kind of situation. Our athletic director uh, met with us and said, if you don't participate, you will lose your scholarships. And so 11 of us lost our scholarships because we didn't participate. However, that entire conference changed attitude. The black student unions and all of the 10 universities at the Black Studies departments, they started to protest. And that was when it all started to really become a very big thing within the university. And so I then continue uh, to stay focused on the Olympic Games. Even after all of that was done, uh, all I could think about was, man, it'd be nice to stand up on that podium to get that gold medal. And so from that point on, I won just about every invitational meet because I had become All-American at the NC2A Division One. I made All-American in two events, the long jump and triple jump. So I was on my way and very, I guess you might say, I can't say cocky, but uh, I just felt like uh, you couldn't beat me. And
Right.
so that generally is the idea just about of to me, every Olympic uh, athlete, team, individual that would come up that has to say, you know, I'm going to be number one, and I'm the best in the business, and so forth. And so it became a nice thing for me, uh, working towards making the Olympic team.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Coach,
Yeah.
as Bob said, '68 was a tumultuous time.
Yeah.
In the United States, for United States, having so many of your friends knowing they're going to the Olympics, what was your thoughts of them competing and America in the state that it was that didn't kind of respect people of color?
Well, it was a real tumultuous time racially because, I was, we talked about a little bit earlier, Earl. I came up when the race thing was front and center from 63, 64, all the way up to the Olympics, and I was playing international with the armed forces. I represented the Navy along with one of our old guys. Bobby, remember Mike Barrett? And both of us played Navy. He made the Olympics. I didn't. Mike Sullivan, that's during the time when they had the two military people per Olympic team. You had to have two military individuals along with that. And man, it was really rough. The Olympic trials were interesting for me, but it was really packed racially, as far as the accommodations and things of that nature you had to get to. Basketball was a little bit different, as Bob can tell you that the track and field guys, especially with the former Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali out there with the guys. Ours was a little bit different because basketball, we didn't have a problem with Spencer and the guys, as Bob could attest to you. We were ready. We just wasn't just enough room on the team for us when we got out to Colorado Springs. But man, it was rough. I mean, a lot of cats that I knew went through some real tumultuous time. Even Earl Monroe. Earl Monroe was in the same class of it, and so you can imagine the pick and choosing and the situations out there was really rough. Some places that we played, and I think Bob can attest to it. I mean, they still would not let us stay in certain hotels. I mean, it was still very much of a tumultuous time. Robert Kennedy, and then of course the Martin Luther King assassination just compiled everything into a pressure cooker when it got to Mexico. Wasn't able to go, but we were front and center by being in support of the guys. But Bob took up. He's very. His humility speaks for itself. But he was one of the main leaders out there with Muhammad Ali, then Cassius Clay, the guys on the Olympic team with Spencer and JoJo and Charlie, Scott and the Cats, and that went right on down to the rest of them. I mean, with the actual track and field. So
Bob, let me ask you that the leap that set the record. Standing up on the runway for that leap, what goes through your mind? And then you have the leap, you look back to see what the distance is. How's the emotion after that?
Well, let's kind of videotape it from the time you step on the runway to actually running down the runway, and then, of course, striking the board and trying to make your vertical and your horizontal compatible with each other, and then, of course, trying to get a perfect landing. And so, when you're when they call your name and you're standing up there, the only thing that I'm remembering is that everything becomes very natural. It becomes instinct. You don't have to think about getting running down or how to plant yourself. Once once you get on that runway, everything is automatic. And if you think about it, things ain't gonna work out for you. And so it's basically like basketball. When you get on the court, uh, you gotta think for the other four people as well as yourself.
Yeah.
So everything becomes rather automatic because you have worked many years on on your ability to be able to do many things at one time and think many things at one time and be very successful with it. And so as I stood up at the runway, um, what I said to myself was, I've come over 3,000 miles, and so I better have this thing right. Let me get down this runway and perform. And so what I wanted to do was to, I guess, be as natural as I can. None of the adrenaline wasn't working that intensely, but what you do know is that you got to do something special. And so as I stood down and looked down the runway, I started to go down the runway, and I'm going at such an incredible speed because I had this great opportunity to work with some of the greatest runners of all times. Tommy Smith and John Carlos, all these cats were I trained with, and
Yeah.
my speed, I probably could have ran 100 in probably 10 seconds flat. I was so fast. I was like, well, running down the runway looks like I was an airplane getting ready to take off as you take off. And so I swept the board perfectly. And I was way up over 6 feet.
Yeah.
And while I was up in the air, I looked at my watch and I was like, whoa, man, I'm up here a long time, man. And so I landed, and I landed probably terribly because of the impact that came. I landed on my butt instead of landing on my legs. And so I tried to clean it up by just jumping up real quick, but the imprint was already there. So they had to measure from my buttocks to the board, and it came out to 29 feet, 2.5 inches. And I didn't find that out until probably almost 20 minutes or 30 minutes later because they had problems with the measuring tape. The measuring device was electronic, and the electronic device was too short to measure, so they had to go to Ace Hardware all the way from Mexico City to the United States to get a tape from Ace Hardware to measure my jump, and my jump was measured 8.9 meters, and I said to myself, I wonder what that could be, 8.9 meters, because I thought maybe they might be talking about a different event. Because I'm talking about the feet and inches, and they're talking about meters. And so they plastered 8.9 meters on the board, electronic board. And I said, wow, I wonder, was that the high jump or the or the discus or something like that. And so they said, Bob, that's your jump of 29 feet, 2.5 inches. And so that's when I felt like I was between time and space. I just never anticipated anything that that length of jump. I had jumped 3 feet over the Olympic record and 2 feet over the world record. And so it was a day that I describe as a peak experience in my life.
Take us through the moments on the podium, because obviously America's going through so much, and you know now you're going to be standing and the flag's going to be raised. Take us through that moment, because it wasn't a good time for people of color at that time, but at the Olympic Games it was an opportunity to I guess show that people of color can lead that country.
Well, the flag ceremony was pretty interesting and dangerous as well. When we look at the situation that happened with John Carlos and Tommy Smith, they were kicked out of the Olympic Village. They were told to immediately go home. And that was when, to me, was a very difficult time to watch, our friends, go through a very serious things in life, such as, they had life-threatening calls in their house. They had to move. They couldn't get any jobs. The threat to their life. It was just a very bad time. And so when I got up on the podium to receive my medal, my teammate Ralph Boston said, "Let's think about not raising your fist and just go through your ceremony, because it was a tremendous amount of pressure on standing up there and watching, John and Tommy. Just it was the most strangest situation that I could ever imagine. So I stood up on the podium and received the medal without that protest, but I did wear my black socks and in protest. And remember, I had already protested at the University of Texas at El Paso, so it was a tremendous thing going through my head while I was standing there receiving the award, and to know that life is going to be different as we go back to our homes and our hometown, and that jobs weren't going to be there for us. I mean, there was so many things that the American flag and the Star Spangled Banner was actually sounding. And I left the next day to get back to class at the University of Texas at El Paso. However, again, we had lost our scholarship. And so I did a 10 classes, but it was a tough one. It was tough. I had no welcomes at the airport. It was a very sorrowful situation in El Paso at the time. So it was heavy duty for African Americans, particularly for the 60 and Olympic Games.
Coach, you're
Yeah.
watching a friend of yours, someone you know really well, do something that kind of electrified the games itself. How emotional was it for you and your friends knowing Bob is now a globe setter, a world setter, a trend setter?
Oh man, uh, I can't really tell you the emotions. We were so proud, man. We were enthralled at the way that the world received and appreciated. You see, what is very interesting. I think Bob is again is being somewhat a sense of humility does deserve, but these guys were heroes all over the world outside of being appreciated in the U.S. They were the heroes. Bob can tell you every time the guys went abroad, they were Tommy and Carlos were more respected and honored worldwide than in the U.S. Now that is a big thing to say, but it's true. They were the heroes of all the people of color and the people and Caucasian people around the world more so than what because they stood up for something. Martin Luther King had just got assassinated. Bobby Kennedy, the vanguard of the Kennedy family, had just got assassinated, and racial tensions and things of that nature were at its apex. These guys sacrificed for that. Actually, I think the entire Olympic team suffered. The only guys that really got anything to say out of it was Muhammad Ali, who turned Cassius Clay turned in that, and then he was ridiculed by it. But people don't even realize, and I think Bob can test that the greatest basketball team, one of the greatest basketball teams were the youngest of it because you couldn't have pros during that time. Spencer Haywood, 18 years old. Charlie Scott, JoJo White. I mean, Brewer. I mean, he had the cream de la cream out there, but they were overshadowed by the racial tensions that were going on. It's very interesting, Earl, and I really appreciate you and David and the Basket Network and the contribute to recognize because this man was the apex and galvanizing force for the entire Olympic team. Now I can say that without any candor at all. Anybody who knows Bob Beamon and was affiliated with the team during that time could tell you this was the galvanizer. What he did was unlike anything else because it was more of a, could I say, white sport? What he took over, man. I mean, outside of Jesse Owens doing it, he took it to another level. That's why that apex jump that he had from the long jump is not only in the Olympic trademark for the United States Olympic there in the museum and around the world, but it's something that's really impactful in every high school or college in the country. So that's what it meant. I couldn't believe it. I was so proud. I was wondering when he was going to come down, and I was there with some pretty heavy hitters in basketball. And I think Bob, remember me, I was there with Hambone Williams, Bob Hambone Red, and these are the guys that was going in the league with me in the draft of the ABA. All of us there just watching this thing, and when Bob jumped, man, I mean, it seemed like he will never come down. So I've been joking this guy for all these years. Hey, Bob, when you coming down, man? You come down now, Bob. So it's something. It's very special, and everybody, the pride of New York, of course, was Bob Beamon. Yeah.
Bob, we see the struggles that are going on in not only in the United States but around the world that takes you back to those really testing times. How does what's happening today all across America, how does that make you feel, and what do you reflect back on that could possibly give advice to people that want to make this change and stand up strong?
Well, first of all, let me some historical data that that I don't want to leave out because I think it's very significant. Uh, 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 Coach talked about Charlie Scott and JoJo White, Spencer Haywood. We also had George Foreman, who I used to have eat breakfast with every morning, and every morning we would motivate each other and just say, you know, I'm going to win my gold medal, and George would say, I'm going to win my gold medal. And at the time, you know, both of us spoke very little. We didn't, you know, we didn't have much to say, you know, or we were afraid to say something. And so, but what we did leave with at that breakfast table was the fact that we felt that very confident in our particular discipline that we would do well. As we move forward, and I think I briefly made comment to, I'm looking at 1968 or mid 60s where protests were at an all-time high. I would say from the time that Medgar Evers was assassinated all the way up to Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy were assassinated also. And so protests, I look at today, is, to me, one of the key factors in how change can come about, because that's where changes started back in the 60s, and particularly 68. There was so much protest, protest lines around the country. As we see it today, the youth now are coming out and they're making their stand as we did back in the 60s of the youth making our stand about making the changes. So this is 50 years later, 50 some years later, we see things are happening again. And so I'm very proud to see that the young generation is now taking the stand of making changes. And so I applaud them, and that we want that keep happening until there are the changes that we are asking to be changed.
Well, I do want to thank you both for your time. And again, Bob, looking at being the trendsetter that you was during those Olympic Games and still holding records today, I feel honored with the opportunity to sit and chat with you along with Coach Hatcher and just get some insight as to how things were. And hopefully people that listen and watch this will get a sense of the challenges that you guys faced on a daily basis. They still exist today.
Absolutely. Just to bring you up to date, just agreed to take this wonderful award called the William Simon Award with the Olympic movement, and that'll be in December in New York City.
Okay.
And it's always a blessing to to look at my jump and say, through videos that the record still stands after 50 some years, that nobody has surpassed it. So this is the oldest record in the history of the Olympic Games, 50 years, 52 years it'll be. And so I just say that I'm very blessed to have that record still standing after 50 some years. In addition to that, I travel pretty much worldwide of representing the Special Olympics as the ambassador to Special Olympics. So I'm always excited to work with the Special Olympic athletes too. So that's a blessing too for me.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Coach. I was glad to be here with you again this week. We look forward to another edition next week. Appreciate your time, and to Bob.
All right.
Well done. Congratulations, and may that.
All right. Thank you so much. And Bob, again,
more.
we're so happy to represent the legends of sports with Sports Inside and Out Legends Show, and bringing in collaboration with Bermuda and Bascom TV network. We're always happy to bring you the cream de la cream of those that help make the game of professional sports, and of course, giants of the game. So thanks a lot.
It's a blessing, Coach. Thank you for the invite. As you can see in my background here, this is my music room back here, and I collect music, love music, play music, play an instrument, and I have thousands and thousands of LPs back here. So if you ever want to do a show on LPs and what was going on, yes, absolutely.
All right.
Whatever you want, I got it.
All right, I heard that. All right. Thanks a lot,
Thanks,
man. Really
gentlemen.
appreciate you. God bless.
Thank you.
Yes. Have a great day.
All right.